So if you guys are ready, I'll just kick it off. So I do have a somewhat sizable presentation. I think I have an hour and a half here. I'm guessing I'll take about an hour to just yap about stuff, and then we'll have questions. Might finish a little sooner than that. We'll see kind of how it goes.
Oh, you got plenty of time before Shuhan.
Yeah. So thanks everybody for coming by. Fun times in Oates' stream. So welcome to this thing. I have prepared for you all an extremely professional slideshow. I do, in fact, do this for a living. I make slideshows just like this. And to get kicked off, we're just going to observe some Fang ass. It's a tradition coming over from my writer's workshops. So, you're welcome. So to get everything started, who the heck am I? Right? I guess a few people probably know who I am. I have a little bit of a silly reputation. If you don't know who I am, hello, I'm StarmanSuper, also known as Other Things. I wrote a thing that you're probably familiar with. Yeah. I wrote another thing that you're probably familiar with that I'll talk about a little bit later. As far as personal background, I actually do work professionally as a trainer. So as a day job, I do teach people some software stuff, but I do teach them how to do things. I have also been doing creative writing for over 20 years. And I also host a writer's workshop every week in the Snoot Club server. Again, I'll talk about that more a little bit later, but if you're ever interested in jumping on for a writer's workshop, we have little class times. We have fun over there. It happens every Tuesday night at like 7 o'clock Central, and we essentially just have a nice time. I don't know. So what the heck is this, right? Some dude came on to yap about some sort of presentation, and the name of the presentation / the topic we're going to be going over is From Writer to Author, The Road to Publishing. That's the name I came up with. No, it's not pretentious. The hell are you talking? Okay, all right. Well, apparently my slideshow is just going to insult me. Get fucked. We're talking about our first novel, right? We're going to discuss what you can do to actually create and generate your first written work. It's something that would actually be published and be able to be put in people's hands, right? So what actually is this presentation? There are a lot of folks who enjoy writing. That can include creative writing, it can be fan fiction, it can be poetry, you name it, right? Everyone likes writing stuff. A lot of those same people also enjoy reading, or they should. This is a point of contention, unfortunately, with some writers. They refuse to actually read, even though it's the best way to become a better writer, but what the hell do I know? They also enjoy sharing their creations. Again, if any of you have ever done writing, it's very nice to have people read your stuff, to get feedback, and to feel that nice, happy, warm, fuzzy feeling that someone read your thing and they enjoyed it. So, what I would challenge you for, show me a writer who does not dream of having their book on a person's shelf, and I'll show you a thing that is equally as unplausible and unlikely. I don't know. A lot of people who write would enjoy having their stuff on a shelf. Can I explain this further? Sure. So most writers would love, most writers who would love to be elevated to the status of author may not know where to begin. The difference between those two I'll explain in just a moment. They may not even know if they are worthy of such a lofty goal, right? It's like, can you actually achieve such a thing if you were a simple, humble fan fiction writer or something else? Luckily, there are, in fact, a myriad of tools at everyone's disposal to not only achieve actually becoming published, but to actually maximize your time in the space and make a big imprint, right? We're going to kind of talk about a toolbox of sorts. We're going to talk about some different things that you can utilize to essentially improve your chances or try to end up getting published in the most professional and best way possible. But what's the difference, right? I was just talking about being a writer versus being an author. What the hell's the difference? Well, let's take a look at dictionary definition. Sure. Basic definition of a writer is a person who has written a particular text. Go fucking figure. Very basic. An author is a writer of a book, an article, or a report. Fantastic. So now we have a tautology. We're defining one by just using the other. It's just cyclical and it kind of feeds back on itself. However, this gets pretty interesting when you dive into the roots of these words, right? So what we're looking at is the actual etymology of the word writer, or to write, and then the word author. The roots of the word writer. It is based on the Old English ritan, which is to score, outline, draw the figure of, and then later to set down in writing, be acquainted with the craft of letters, set forth as an author. Now that's important. Set forth as an author. You're not quite there, but you're kind of working in that direction. It's a class 1 strong verb, past tense, rat, past participle, ritan. Yeah, so on and so forth. Now, this is also based on Proto-Germanic ritan, tear, or scratch. I'm probably butchering these pronunciations. Forgive me. I'm not a linguist. This is also the source of, which is also the source of Old Frisian rita, to write, Old Saxon ritan, to tear, scratch, or write, Old Norse rita, write, scratch, outline, Old High Germanic rizan, to write, scratch, or tear, German reisen, to tear, pull, tug, sketch, draw, or design, so on and so forth. Outside connections are doubtful. Again, we're just looking at the specifics of sort of what this is based on, or essentially. And you see a lot of these words you're using: writing, scratching, outlining, tearing, pulling, tugging, sketching. It's all very rough, right? It's all very like, yeah, to write is to just, take a pencil and on a paper. That's writing. That's very basic. But what are the roots of the word author? Well, to be an author, again, this is based on Middle English: autor, actor, or actor, originator, creator, authoritative source, and writer. Again, we're kind of feeding back to that original definition, but look at some of those other words that are being used, right? Creator, authoritative source. This is borrowed from Anglo-French and Latin. It's Anglo-French actor, actor. I'm butchering these pronunciations. Forgive me. Originator, creator, instigator, party, authority, writer. Borrowed from Latin, actor, principal in a sale, person entitled to take action, authorize, originate. Okay, so on and so forth, right? A little bit more extra definition there. Now here's a note. Variants with the medieval th as author, etc., so the thor, become current in the 16th century and lead to spelling pronunciations with O in the 17th century. The spellings are presumed to reflect association with authentic and its Latin and Greek sources, as author in the sense of the first beginner and mover of anything, as Samuel Johnson put it, is the ultimate guarantor of authenticity. So again, the word author is rooted in authority and authenticity. You can kind of see those roots building into it. So what does this all mean? Anyone can be a writer, right? Kind of like Ratatouille, anyone can cook, right? If you have a basic understanding of your language, absolutely anyone can be a writer. To be an author is to have some level of authority, especially with your creation. It seems daunting, and it is, I will say, if this is something you're interested in pursuing, moving from writer to author, it is a challenge. It is something you really have to work on, but a lot of it boils down to mindset, right? A lot of this has to do with how you approach your craft and how you focus on what you are doing and how you focus on improving your work. Now, before we go further, right? The big disclaimer I'm going to put here, make sure you actually want to be an author, right? It is okay if you don't. There are people out there who just want to write for fun. That's totally fine. There are also people out there who want to write, or who write in spaces that they can't really legally publish, right? Again, fan fiction authors, things like that. We have a ton of people, even in the fan fiction space, who are writing really good stuff. How cool would it be for them to publish it? Unfortunately, we have to deal with weird copyright bullshit and all that. It just gets problematic, Now, if that is you, if you are someone who is interested in writing, but not necessarily interested in becoming a published author, that's fine. I would encourage, just still stick around because you might still get some useful tidbits from the lesson. There's a chance that, you could still learn something, even if it's not a topic that's 100% allocated to you. What does this mean for me, right? Or for you, whoever it is, If you are an aspiring author, you're going to need to exercise several things. I kind of broke this down into some keyed bullet points to start with. And the things that I think are most important for an aspiring author are discipline, excellence, patience, and persistence. This is what I like to call the DEP system. So, welcome to the Johnny Depp system. As I was making this, I accidentally made the acronym. And I was like, all right, I guess that's what we're going with. So, to go through the bullet points of the Johnny Depp system, if you want to follow these steps, let's start with the D, discipline, right? If you are focusing on discipline, this is a key component for any successful author. And discipline is the thing that makes everything else work, right? If you maintain discipline throughout your writing, your proofing, your editing, and your publishing processes, you will find success. It's not easy, but it's something you have to do. And discipline does kind of overlap with some of our other keywords, but I just want you to keep it in the back of your mind as an overarching, you need to be disciplined in what you are doing. You need to focus on this as though it is a, true goal that you are shooting for and something that's going to take some effort. You're not just going to fall into it. Point 2 is excellence, right? You are your best and your worst critic. You are the only one that can hold you're the only one that can hold you to the level of excellence that you require. Your work will never be perfect, but it does need to be as damn good as you can possibly make it at this point in time. And I would encourage you, do not settle for mediocrity in anything. I have a picture of Johnny Depp for every single one of these slides, by the way. The big point with this, and a lot of people get nervous when I say something like this. They're like, oh, well, my writing isn't excellent. My writing's only okay. It's like, that might be okay, but you need to do as good as you can, right? You'll never be perfect. You're never going to get to, it's just unfortunately, it's I forget the term for it, but like the plight of any artist, right? You could be a painter, you could be a musician, you can be a writer. Any artist, your work is never going to be as good as you want it to be. You're always going to catch mistakes. You're always going to have things that you struggle with. You're always going to have things that you want to improve and you want to experiment with. That's just the nature of it. But you do need to get yourself to the best possible point that you can, right? Think of it this way. If you're a runner, you're someone who goes on like a 5K, right? And you know that you can run the 5K in, I shouldn't have brought up this example because I don't know a realistic time to run a 5K, but you have a specific time that you can run that in, then you want to try to shoot for that time or better, right? You might only beat it by a second or two. You might beat it by 30 seconds or a minute or 2 minutes, right? That's amazing. The better you do, the better you do. But what you don't want to do is slack and come in 10 minutes lower than you could have, right? That's not going to your top potential. You are dragging your feet and you're not actually striving for excellence, right? Now, does the runner want to be able to run it 25 minutes faster than he can? Of course, if he was the Flash or whatever. I don't know. Again, I don't know what a 5K takes to run. But you want to get it as good as you possibly can up to your limit, up to your benchmark, without hurting yourself, of course. Point 3 is patience, right? So both the writing and the publishing process can and will take time. I will say, from personal experience, I'll talk about this in a little bit, being impatient will 100% lead to errors. You are anxious to get your work. You're anxious to get your work in front of others, but what are they going to think if your work is riddled with easily avoidable goofs, right? If you are not patient, if you just rush through, you're like, I'm so excited to get this in front of people, I'm just going to slam, bam, wham, jam through the process, there are going to be fuck-ups. And you really don't want that, right? It's the same with your writing. You want your writing to be as high quality as you can possibly make it, so you don't want to rush through it. And of course, you're going to need to take some time, and you don't want it to take forever. You don't want to take 10 years to write a fucking follow-up to Game of Thrones, you hack. But you do need to spend the time on it that it needs to have spent on it, and that includes the publishing process. And then the last P here in the DEP system is persistence. Even once your work is published, the awards will not just start streaming in, right? This is going to take some work after the fact. Actual authors, now when I say actual authors, I'm talking your big names, your actual published whoever's, they do a ton of work, right? They do book tours, they do signings, they do local events, they do possibly conventions. There's all sorts of stuff that these people do. The bigger they are, the more of an audience they draw, but they still put in the work. Even if they're just a lesser known author or someone working their way up, they're still trying. They're still doing what they can to get their name out there, right? Because they want to build up that bond with their community. They want to put their name out there further. So what I would suggest is have a game plan for what you will do to promote your work post-publishing. And you don't have to think about this immediately, right? If you haven't even written something, it's like this is so far in the future, you can kind of wait for it. But the sooner you think through these things, the more opportunity you're going to have to think through it and make sure that it's the appropriate course of action for you. The last point there, don't forget about social media. I'll bring this up again. Social media is, unfortunately, extremely important these days. I fucking hate social media, but it is what it is. That's another way to, again, promote and get your name out there and kind of get what you need going. So, how do we get there? What I will demonstrate, or what I will show to you all, and what I will demonstrate. You doing okay, Oates? Is that snoring?
Not yet. Not yet. Listen, I have 4 people whose job it is to make sure I don't fall asleep. They have my phone number. They can call me if they suspect.
So what I'd like to show you all is a patented 5-step process. This is patent pending, of course. It's not exactly patented. Patent pending. You bringing him around here? Bringing him here around my unpatented ideas? So I do have 5 steps, though. We're going to go through kind of a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So step 1, write a thing. Can you believe it, right? If you want to get published, the first thing you got to do is write a thing. Duh, what the hell do you mean, duh? Come on, you stupid PowerPoint presentation. You suck. No, you suck. All right, whatever. I'll stop arguing with my PowerPoint. Okay, I know that this seems self-explanatory, but everyone has to start somewhere. If you haven't ever written a thing before, start there. Write something, right? Obviously, put your fucking fingers on the keyboard and write. I get asked so many times with my writer's workshops, I have all these ideas for stuff, but I don't know how to write. It's like, put your fingers on the keyboard and write. You have to start somewhere, right? If you want to learn how to play the piano, you can't just stare at the piano. Nothing's going to happen. Put your fingers on the frickin' keys, right? You've got big ideas, write them down. Make a story. This is too big of a topic for me to spend a bunch of time on for this particular presentation, right? If you are interested in learning how to become an author or a writer or just getting some basic general tips, pop by my writer's workshops. I give tips. I give all sorts of stuff with those workshops. We basically go over typically like a class time at the front. It's a little bit like this, about a half hour long-ish. But I'll talk about some sort of topic, some fun things to kind of help enhance everyone's writing. And then we actually cover people's fan fictions, right? People submit their work. We go over it. We give them friendly critique. We have a little fun. There's some laughter and all that. We don't bully people, but there might be a little light teasing if you write a funny typo. But we do what we can to essentially help improve our writers. The people in that community seem to enjoy those workshops. They keep resubmitting for some reason. Despite me being such a humongous bully, I'm a big asshole, depending on who you talk to. Okay. Hey, whoa, oh my god, you just wrote a thing. Wow, congratulations, you did it. Yay, congratulations, congratulations, congratulations. Now, before you move on to step 2, you need to ensure that you actually want to go down this road. Again, this kind of comes back to the whole, is this actually something you want, right? Sometimes you don't. Even legit authors will write stories that just don't pan out and end up getting shelved, or they get stuffed into a collection after they die, Either way, that's totally fine. If you just want to write, congratulations. I'm super happy. Keep doing it. Keep living your best life. Have fun. Enjoy your time. These next steps are if you want to take that next step, right? You want to become a published author, or you just want to take your writing more seriously. So, buckle up, because this is where the rubber meets the road, baby. This is the fun part. All right. Step 2. Stare at your unholy creation to the point where you hate every single word you've written, reviewing and drafting and editing and finalizing and reviewing again and again and again until your eyes burst from your skull due to the inevitable heat death of the universe that will still occur sooner than you will be pleased with your work. Being an author is fun. Yay. So, step 2, hate your life, right? The road to authorship is paved with self-doubt, anxiety, and depression. Yay! However, if you want your work to be taken seriously, it is a road that you must travel. Woohoo! Right? This is just part of the process. Even though it sucks, even though you have to take a butcher's cleaver to your baby and shave off 10 to 20% of your loving creation to make it an actual palatable, publishable work, you gotta do it. It's very sad. Now, with that being said, can you travel this road with someone else? Maybe. It depends. this is an area that I do catch some people early in the process, and it's something I do want to warn everyone about. So, things like proofreaders and beta readers for work are invaluable. And I would remind you, if you are publishing, you should fully credit them in your final product. Oh, it's your mother's listening? Should I should I say a lot more curse words?
I think that's on you.
Let's really crank it up to 11. Let's go, baby. So proofreaders and beta readers are invaluable. However, you really need to be careful. I would advise that you be wary of over-reliance. One of the problems that I see is I have a lot of writers, especially in this community, who write something, but they're very unconfident with their work, or they're just not putting in the effort that they need, and they're schlocking it off to proofreaders to fix and make swathful changes, right? Like they dump 80% of a chapter onto a proofreader and expect them to do the last 20%. That's really not okay, right? That's not okay when you are trying to publish a work, because essentially what you're dealing with at that point is co-authorship. How much work is that person putting in? And are they putting in enough work for their name to be on the front of the fucking book? Are they putting in enough work for them to be receiving royalties? Or half? I mean, it just depends, right? You should be the one who is creating your work. And yes, getting feedback, getting some suggestions, things like that is okay. But you shouldn't over-rely on these resources, because, first off, those resources may not always be there, right? The person might just say, fuck this, I'm done, I don't want to do it anymore. The resource that you're using may not be as expertly qualified as you'd hoped, and they may actually be causing more problems. I have seen it in our community. I will not name names, but I have seen it where people will volunteer to quote-unquote help with a work, and what they're actually doing is like morphing it and bastardizing it into a thing that they want it to be instead. So they're essentially taking the thing over and shape-shifting it. That's not cool, right? You don't want that, because it's your story. Like, you should be the one writing the story. That's part of the problem with this whole co-authorship thing. Does that mean it's impossible to co-author a work? Of course not. You can, and there are lots of cases where works are co-authored.
Like
one of the more famous pairings is Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett, right? They go to Gen Con. They are massive authors in the fantasy universe, and they've been working together for 30 years or something, right? The two of them have basically just been joined at the hip for writing. Totally fine. But that's their thing. They're co-writing. You got other examples, Stephen King and Peter Straub, working together to write a thing, that type of thing. And then, a bunch of these other examples I don't really recognize, but you can have co-authors. However, working with a co-author is also going to come with a slew of its own potential headaches, so I would advise that you be cautious, right? Co-authorship can get problematic because, again, when you start to decide, like, hey, you write a thing, maybe it takes off. Maybe, oh my god, it's all of a sudden selling like gangbusters and all this money's coming in. Are you two splitting that 50-50? Or are you suddenly arguing about it? Are you trying to get 60-40, right? Are you arguing over the money? What happens if you wrote the first book in a series, but the other person doesn't want to help with the second book? They piss off to do their own thing, right? You can't control another person. You can't force them to do a thing outside of some crazy legal contracts. But you can write for yourself, right? If you write a book and you want to write a sequel, who the fuck's going to stop you? You're going to write it, right? There's no hurdle there. So, again, just be careful. If you do decide to go down the route of co-authorship or whatever, make sure you think about these things. What else do we want to consider prior to pulling the trigger on actually moving forward with this? Well, I've alluded to this already. You are going to need to spend a lot of time reviewing your own writing, and you're going to have to put your writing through multiple drafts. Many new authors think that they don't have to do this. They write a first draft, and a first draft is their final draft, right? You probably did it in high school. You might have done it in college. Hey, back then it was probably okay because the teacher didn't even bother reading it. It's not okay here. You cannot submit a first draft because this is going to be riddled with problems. You just can't do it. I'm sorry to say, I know this is going to come across as harsh. You are not nearly as good of a writer as you think you are, right? Again, I've had to eat a little bit of humble pie myself a few times. If my head gets a little too big, sometimes I look back and go, oh my god, I can't believe I actually thought that was acceptable when I wrote that 6 months ago. What the fuck, right? You're just not as good of an author as a writer as you think you are, but you can, of course, work to improve. As you go through this process, right, this is why we're reviewing and we're drafting, you're going to be catching shit that's wrong with your work up to and very likely after you publish. Case in point, I actually had a fucking I was working on jumping ahead a little bit. I was working on the final manuscript. I was getting ready to plug this thing in and click submit, right? The final manuscript. Looking through this thing, and I caught a massive typo. And it straight up gave me a panic attack. I was like, what the fuck? How did I possibly miss this for having written this thing for a year and 3 months? Somehow it just fell through the crack every single time. This thing went through a first draft, a second draft, a third draft, a fourth and final draft, and had beta readers, and I proofread it. It was like, how did I miss this until now? Until the literal 11th hour, 11:59 p.m. I caught it, thankfully, right? And it's not something that's wrong with it after I actually sent it to print. Wouldn't be the end of the world, but it was a big enough typo that it really, really irked me, right? It was a massive undersight, something I missed all of those times, and I'm very thankful that I caught. I wouldn't have caught it if I submitted this. If I didn't do one of those drafts, or if I just rushed this thing out, I wouldn't have caught it, and my work would have been worse for it. So, at this point, I'd like to make a quick recommendation. Oh my god, if you've been to my writer's workshops, you've heard me suck Stephen King's dick. Holy cow. He's not the best author in the world. Let's get all of it out of the way, whatever. You can talk about the goofy shit he wrote in the book It, all the cocaine he did, whatever, right? He's not the best author in the world. However, his book on writing is very good as a starting point for a new author. Because what he does is, the book is like, I'd say, like 30% his childhood. Like he kind of just talks about his childhood and then his not just his childhood, but like he talks about getting started with writing, him actually trying to break out in the writing world. Like it's his backstory for a good chunk of it. Within that, he folds in a lot of anecdotes and things that he kind of applies, like this is something that I learned that I think is important for you. And then he spends about 40% of the book talking about the actual like tips, right? This is what you should be doing. If you are an aspiring author, you need to do this, you need to do that. There are a lot of opinions of his that I agree with. There are a couple of opinions of his that I don't agree with, right? Be a critical reader if you do read this. Don't just accept every single thing he says as gospel truth. Keep in mind, he wrote this back in 1982 or something, right? It's been revised a few times. He's added and changed a few things, but it's still a little aged. Even still, there is a ton of helpful stuff here, right? It's a good book. It's cheap-ish, I guess. You could probably read it online or something. But I would recommend this as a good starting point if you are serious about writing. I read it when I got serious about writing, and it helped. Full stop. It helped. Now, I'd like to take a moment to talk about a very powerful tool that you can add to your personal toolbox, and that is of the Style Guide. If anyone is familiar with, if you've ever worked in a corporate setting, you've ever been responsible for doing something like sending out letterhead or writing an email, they've probably given you a style guide that says, these are the specifics of our brand, right? If you are using a logo of our company in your corporate email address, which you're supposed to do, then you need to use this email logo or this email logo, no others. Don't change the color, don't have a fucking background on your email, whatever, right? That's their style guide. So, as a writer, what a style guide is, it's something that almost no early writers utilize. A style guide does a ton of lifting for you, and it ensures consistency throughout your writing with very specific elements. Let me provide an example for you. How do you write the name of a song in your story? You want to write the name of a song out? How do you write that? Well, you have some options. You could write, so this is a song by Miles Davis. It's called Freddie Freeloader. You could put it in quotation marks. You could put it in italics. You could put it in italics with single quotes around it. How the hell are you doing it, right? How does this vary from album names? If I wanted to mention the song Freddie Freeloader from the album Kind of Blue, how would I do that? Being consistent about the way you do it is what's important. I could pick any of these, right? I could italicize a song name and quote an album name or vice versa, but I need to be consistent about it because if I suddenly switch it up later, I have set the precedent that I am putting the album name in quotes, so suddenly putting the album name in italics can confuse my reader. You may call this a very small thing. This is another thing I get accused of. People are like, oh, it's such a small thing. Who's going to notice? Who cares? People fucking care, right? Someone's going to read your work. They're going to see that and they're going to say, this guy didn't do his homework. This guy slacked, right? This person did not put in that extra work to make sure that it's consistent. And they may not pick up your next book, right? You might lose a reader because of this. Do you want to lose a reader, or do you want to put in a couple minutes of work to make sure that your shit's consistent? Now, other things that the style guide can apply to, right? From things as small as how you write out numbers, such as writing 10 versus 10 as TEN, or how do you write out times, right? 10 a.m. versus 10 A period M period in caps versus 10 a.m. in caps versus 10 TEN a.m., etc., 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 right? Do you have a space between those two? Do you not have a space? Again, this seems super pedantic, but it's very important, all the way up to your specific mannerisms of your characters. Comprehensive note-taking and a thorough style guide is invaluable. You can build this as you go, but you do want to start sooner than later, right? If you've written a work, let's say you're done with your thing, you've got 150,000 words down and you never did a style guide, oops, you might want to go back and review your work and build a style guide as you do. This was my first draft, right? I'm sorry, let me rephrase. This was my second draft. When I wrote my book, I got my first draft done, and I realized, about 75% of the way through, that I never made a style guide and I was inconsistent about exactly this stuff. Why did I just talk about song names and record names? Music's a huge part of what I was writing, and I wasn't consistent about it. So I realized partway through that I had some inconsistency. So for my second draft, I ignored almost everything else, and I just went through and made sure. Every time I talked about the time, every time I talked about this, every time I used inner dialogue versus outer dialogue, every time blah, 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 right? Making sure consistency is there. I improved my work by a ton in one draft, and it took me 2 weeks to do it, if even, right? And then when I went on to the third draft, that was actually spending the time to say, okay, do I need this paragraph? Can I retool this? Can I rewrite this? So on and so forth, right? It was super helpful. If you start a style guide sooner than later, you're going to save yourself a ton of time and a ton of effort. It's very easy to do. You just put a notepad next to you, right? Write out, okay, when I do times, I'm going to do it like this. Stay consistent. You're perfectly fine. Now, the next thing I want to discuss is book editing. So within the realm of actually editing a book, again, now we're saying that we have, I say a book, it's not printed yet, but we have a manuscript, right? We've done maybe a draft or two. We've got it where we want it to be. When it comes to editing, we have a few different realms. The first of those is called manuscript critique. This is probably what you are getting from your friends, from other people, from commenters on AO3, or whoever it is that you're sending it to kind of read it. Manuscript critique is purely focused on narrative voice, plot, and character development with the goal of making sure that your story cohesion is as high as you can possibly make it, right? This is you going through and double checking to make sure that if you have a character who has a stutter, he's stuttering in the right places and not stuttering in the wrong places, or whatever. You go through to make sure that this character's voice is kind of weak in this section, so I want to see what I can do to ramp it up. You make sure that your plot doesn't have any holes in it. You make sure so on and so on and so forth. Like, this is obviously super critical for the drafting process, but this is just one part of your editing. The next is what you'd call either a comprehensive or a line edit, right? Line editing is where you basically address structural issues plus writing style and language. So this is going to be more like you're double checking your overall style. Again, you have a story that's set in New York City, or your character speaking with a New York accent, or the appropriate character speaking with a New York accent. It is some guy in from out of town who's a foreigner, who has a foreign accent, but suddenly he's speaking with a New York accent, right? You have ways to write these accents, by the way. But are you consistent with that? Are you consistent with your writing style? Does your style suddenly change halfway through your book because you wrote that 6 months later when your writing style had changed? Do you need to go back and retool the first part to match your style? Are you still using the same type of language, right? This is kind of what you're going over with that comprehensive edit. The next is called a copy edit. This is sometimes mistaken for the line edit, but it is a different thing. A copy edit is where you're reviewing technical flaws like typos, grammar errors, and most importantly, inconsistencies, right? This is where you're actually kind of diving into, again, those inconsistencies with the way you're writing times, the way you're writing song names. That's going to be your copy edit process. We have so many tools these days to help with this. Obviously, there's, like Grammarly, there's the red underline that shows up in Microsoft Word or any other fucking application these days, right? You've got a lot of things to help with this, but they're not perfect. I will say that. I write in present tense, and I cannot tell you the number of times that Google Docs has said, hey, did you mean to write this in past tense? No, never. If I'm writing in past tense, there's a good damn reason for it. I usually don't want past tense. Get the hell out of here. If I just blanket accepted every single recommendation it made, the tense of my book would be just garbage. It would just be all over the place. And then lastly is proofing, right? And technically, some people call this proofreading. I chose to kind of shorten it up a little bit because, again, people, especially in our realm, we consider proofreading just to be a person like looking over your work and giving you some feedback on it. That's not quite what this is. Proofing is you examining the final copy of your work for things such as awkward page breaks and typesetting issues. So this is literally, you've got your PDF, you're ready to upload it, but you want to double check and make sure you're not dealing with some funky stuff. I don't know if I have a slide on it, but like one of the things with my manuscript, there's an issue. They're called orphans and widows. It's where, let's say you have a paragraph and you turn the page, and on the next page there's just one word, right? There was one word left of the paragraph, but because the thing couldn't jam it onto the last paragraph, it bleeds onto the next page. That's super unprofessional, right? You never want to have an orphan or a widow. You always want to have at least a full line at the top or at the bottom of the page. Bottoms usually work out. It's less frequent there, but at the top of the page, bleeding from the next one, you have to be careful of that. So when I did my final manuscript, I had to go through and actually like return enter to ensure that I put in like a break that didn't cause a new paragraph, but pushed one line of text down so that the person could turn the page and not be totally confused, right? This type of awkward shit happens when you are basically building your proof copy. This is like you're constructing your final copy. The joys of editing. Now, what you need to kind of ask yourself with editing, right? Are you doing all of this yourself? Are you hiring someone to do this for you? Guess what? Editors are not cheap. You might be able to find someone on here who'd volunteer to do it for $50, but they might not do that great of a job, right? A professional editor is probably going to charge you $50 an hour, and they're going to go through like 6 to 10 pages an hour. Hope you got deep pockets. These are the considerations you need to make up to the publishing process, right? And as I just said, after doing all of this myself, I now understand why being an editor is a paid job. This is a tremendous pain in the ass. Some of you may be asking yourself, is it even worth it? I don't fucking know. I don't know. Maybe, probably not. But it's a big pain in the butt, but it is possible. I did it by myself. I used resources online. I did not get help from anybody, with very minor, I'll give some credit later on, but very minor exception. For the most part, I did all of this myself. Everything I've just talked through, I did all of this myself, and I have a successful product out of it. So keep it in mind. It is possible. It's not easy, but it's possible. Now, step 3, right? We're past the sad part. No, we're not. We're past the dire straits, right? We're past the, oh my god, I want a KMS because I have spent so long reviewing and editing and proofing and drafting all this stuff in my work. Now what? Now it's time to choose your path, right? Choose your adventure, choose your starting Pokemon. I don't know, whatever the hell you want to say. You have 3 potential options for publishing. The first is called traditional publishing. The second is called self-printing. And the third is called self-publishing. What are the differences between these? Traditional publishing. We're going to start with the rough one. Traditional publishing involves shopping your work around to publishing agents who then negotiate terms with publishing houses to publish your work. Wow, they do all the work for you, right? This sounds like a great deal. This is what everyone should do, shouldn't they? Well, I do have some bad news. In the current zeitgeist, unless you check some very specific boxes, image related, you are not going to be accepted by a publishing agent. Plain and simple. I had to deal with and reconcile the fact that as a male who is white and who is straight, no publishing agent would touch me with a fucking 30-foot pole. They just won't. That's the world we live in. Will that change at some point? I don't know, right? The world can always change. Things can get different.
If you sell to such an extent, you will be accepted.
Let me get to that point on this next slide. That is not to say that it is impossible. However, it is just highly unlikely. If you want to go down this road, you would better have some incredible data to show them, right? This is going to be things like tons of user engagement, loads of social media follows, glowing reviews, sales numbers, etc., right? As much as I dislike book talk, the reason that people get published on book talk is because they have millions of people following them on their TikToks. And publishers see that and they say $signs. Sure, I'll take you. Are you a straight white male? I don't give a shit. Do you have 10 million views on TikTok? Welcome. We're publishing your work, right? You're going to be branded as book talk. Are you okay with that? But you're published, right? You have a publishing house. You have a publishing agent. Wow, you got the dream, but you have to prove it. Now, full disclosure, that's my plan, right? Not TikTok, fuck that. My plan is to self-publish. That doesn't help. Trust me. It means nothing. I can say I had 100,000 clicks on AO3 and they're just going to shrug, be like, what? Doesn't mean anything. What the hell is AO3? Right. So what I plan to do is, I'll talk about this in a few minutes. I've self-published my first thing and I'm going to, if I succeed with it, when it comes time for book 2, I'm going to try shopping it around. If it doesn't work, okay, self-publish again. No big deal, right? But I'm building a kind of a portfolio. So you need to do something. Then again, if you happen to be someone who checks those diversity boxes, they might just accept you. I mean, I don't want to sound like miserable about it, but it's like sometimes that does give you a little bit of an edge. I don't know. Again, things could be changing. Political landscape's always exciting, so give it a try. Don't expect a lot, especially if you've never published anything before. It's so hard to get into, no matter what. Don't care, whatever your ethnicity or whatever your sexual orientation is, it's so hard to get in, right? You're probably not going to get picked up on your first try. So, where does that lead us for our second tip, or our second try? Now we have self-printing. Self-printing is when you go through a service, such as Lulu, to print a book and distribute it yourself. Case in point, this is how Bonds was created. Hey, people have seen physical copies of Bonds floating around. I went through Lulu. This has... Exactly, or I Want to Kiss. Also, this does let you circumnavigate some things like copyrighted material. However, I would still be careful. This is not a perfect solution. There's still a very small chance that you could have legal action chased down on you, even if you are just printing it from a self-print service out of your own pocket. It's part of the reason when I did what I did, I used the language that I did, right? People who got a copy of Bonds did not buy a copy of Bonds. They donated some money to me and they received a copy of it as a gift. Is it flimsy? Yeah. Would it hold up in court? Probably not, but it's something. At least I tried, It is what it is. It's don't think that this is a perfect way. And beyond that, there's also a ton of extra sacrifices you're going to have to make, right? Self-printing does have higher costs. You do not receive an ISBN, which is essentially what's going to give you a barcode and allow your book to be sold in stores and sold online and sold anywhere that can actually officially be sold and be registered as an ISBN. And it's also harder to make it available to those who want it, right? With something like I Want to Kiss That Snoot, he did just give the link to Lulu and he could kind of sell through that, but he received nothing from it. He got no royalties. And that's kind of his safety net per se. But he didn't get any money from it. He just did it because some people wanted a physical copy. So, now, a lot of these services will actually try to shift you towards self-publishing. So even Lulu and other similar services, they will offer some additional channels to kind of try to funnel you toward self-publishing. I would recommend that you do your homework, right? I'm going to say this a lot, and in the next several slides, I'm going to be using the words do your homework a lot. Don't use my presentation as a perfect de facto, all of the answers. You need to do your own research, right? This is my experience. I'm giving you some anecdotal stuff, but there's other considerations to make. Make sure you do your own homework when it comes to any of this, right? There are loads of resources online for figuring out which option is going to be best for you and will get you the most exposure. But I would recommend you be careful. Some of these are predatory. Case in point, one of the websites I went to as I was doing research for this was this really nice put together website where it was like, here's tips for self-publishing. Oh, wow, look, we're giving you all these friendly tips and all this nice stuff. Hey, by the way, do you want to use us to self-publish? Look at all these services you're going to get. Look at all this stuff. It's like they have one of the worst rates. That site has some of the worst rates and worst returns for any self-publishing. Looks pretty, looks nice. Wow, look at all these wonderful services I have access to. You're gonna get raked over the coals, right?
Do you mind telling us the name of it, or do you remember? It's okay. They're giving us an example though.
I'm thinking. Give me a second. I didn't write it down. I have the note.
Oh no, you keep going. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, I can't recall. It's again, just be careful is my big thing. Make sure you do a little bit of homework. Talk to some people who have self-published. If people talk to you and they say, "Hey, I used this and it was great. It worked for me," that might be good enough. But just make sure you be careful and do some homework on it. Now, the third point is self-publishing. Right? The difference between self-printing and self-publishing is going to boil down to receiving extra services from your publisher in exchange for a commission. So what happens with essentially getting this type of service or receiving a commission from this, for them receiving a commission. Some examples of this: Amazon Kindle is probably one of the biggest players in the space. There are others. There's Google Play, there's Apple Books, etc. Right? You've got a lot of potential options for the self-publishing route. This is going to include a lot of those things that self-printing does not. But again, there are some sacrifices. There are some caveats to it. I will say it's a little bit of a double-edged sword. Typically, but not always, self-publishing services do allow you to keep the rights to your own work. That's something to be super careful about, right? I skipped ahead a little bit because I just want to point out it's very important that you always read the fine print of any contracts you sign with any of these sites. Make sure that you have the rights to your intellectual property. Some of these places will try to take your rights. And if they do that and you sign a binding contract, you sell your book and it's gangbusters, oops, they get all the proceeds and they get to they get to sell your merchandise rights. Be careful. Make sure you figure out if you still own the rights to your work. Another thing that they do, they will typically typically they will allow you to keep your rights, but one of the caveats is they will typically or usually prevent you from publishing elsewhere at the same time. So, for instance, I went with Amazon Kindle. It's got a paperback, it's got a digital version, it's going to be on Kindle Unlimited, all that fun stuff. That's what I went with. The caveat is I cannot simultaneously have my work anywhere else. I can't sell it on Google Play. I can't sell it on the Apple Store. I'm going to leave it on AO3 for right now. If they yell at me, I might have to take it down, but I don't fucking care. It's like it's free on there, I guess. If for some reason they find it and they get angry at me about it, I might have to take it down, but just read the fine print. Again, make sure you do your homework. There's that word again, do your homework. Make sure you know what's going on. Now, I do want to give a quick note on both copyright and IP. Huge asterisk, I'm not a lawyer. Please don't take any of this as actual legal advice, of course. This is just what I figured out. Copyright falls under intellectual property law. And there's a couple things. For your work, you can purchase a copyright. However, in the United States, it is legal to simply claim copyright with evidence. If you put the copyright symbol in front of your name or in front of your work, with your name by it, that's usually good enough. If you can prove, now again, if someone took me to court and said, "Oh, actually I wrote Kind of Blue," they'd have to prove it, right? And if I was able to prove that I wrote it, then we're good. You can also purchase a copyright. It's like $45 or something. To be honest, I don't know what the difference... Again, this is not legal advice. I don't know what the difference is between buying a copyright and not. I guess it's just like an extra blanket. Like, if someone does pursue me and that's like, I bought the copyright to it, it's like, what are you going to do? The thing, though, is you need to be very careful with your ownership of your intellectual property. Again, this is kind of a down the road thing, but with any of your publishing, any of your research, whatever, if you have aspirations of your work getting to be a New York Times bestseller or something and having a TV show made about it on HBO Max, you really need to know who owns your IP, right? You should own your IP forever, right? You're not necessarily going to make 100% of every profit, but if you own your IP, you're in the best possible place you can be. If someone else owns it, you might be shit out of luck. I'd like to give a quick example with this, with the movie Star Wars and the toy company Kenner. Some of you may know this story already, others may not, but this is a quick anecdote about what can happen if you are not careful about copyright. So, here's what happened. In 1977, actually a year or two before that, George Lucas was working on a movie called Star Wars, right? This is a little indie film. Didn't really have any big traction, anything like that. New property. Sci-fi was not terribly popular at the time. This was off the, Flash Gordon and basically cheesy, corny TV show Sci-fi. Not many people were taking it seriously. Not many people had confidence in the product. So what happened? He had a vision. He had a vision that toys were going to be gangbusters for this thing. And he thought that toy lines were going to make tons and tons and tons of money. No one else did. Everyone was like, George, you're a nut. What are you doing? This is stupid. He shopped the idea of Star Wars around to a ton of toy companies and got rejected by all of them. Until he got to Kenner. Kenner, which is owned by General Mills, or was at the time, agreed to the following. They gave him a flat fee of $100,000 prior to Star Wars being made, which is a big chunk of money, right? That really helped with the production, honestly. And then they made a contract with him that said that he would receive 5 cents in royalties of every dollar, so long as they paid him at least $10,000 a year. And that's the important part. This was a binding legal contract into perpetuity that if they paid him at least $10,000 a year, he would only ever get 5 cents per dollar. He would make 5%. And by he, I do mean Lucasfilm, right? Not just George Lucas. This is just Lucasfilm. So Kenner was keeping 95% of the profit from the toys for Star Wars. He didn't have a choice. George Lucas had his hands tied, and he was like, well, I need to get into the toy market. I can't get a better deal. I guess I'll sign, right? What happened? Between the years of 1977 and 1978, 1 year, Kenner made $100 million. Now, what does that mean? Lucasfilm made $5 million. Neat. Kenner made $95 million in 1978. That's like $4 billion today or something. I don't know. Inflation's fucking crazy. My point is, he got kind of screwed over because he wasn't careful about his own intellectual property. Now, again, did he have a better opportunity? Not really. I mean, he kind of had his hands tied. That was the best he could do. But if he was a little more careful, or maybe if he waited to sell those toy rights, or use those toy rights for like a year after the movie came out, he could have done a lot better. Who knows? Who knows? It's kind of in the past. And funny enough, that legally binding contract was in place for 15 years until I want to say it was 95 or 96, where Kenner accidentally forgot to send that minimum $10,000 payment. And because of that, they had to send a minimum $10,000 payment because they forgot. The contract was null and void, and he was able to renegotiate. Oh, guess what happened? Just like 2 or 3 years after 1996, Star Wars Episode 1 came out. Suddenly, George Lucas was motivated to make a prequel trilogy because he got the toy rights back. And now he's worth like $6 billion. I'm not sure.
Disney gave him more money than God has.
It's stupid, right? Okay, so again, long story short, be careful with your rights. It could cost you a lot. So, real quick, we're going to do an ad break. Hey, guess what? I've been talking about it. I've been alluding to it so far. Kind of Blue is getting published on Amazon and Amazon Kindle. I've already talked about it a few times or whatever, but it is official. I just hit the big shiny red button tonight. It's going to take, I think, 3 business days. They said up to 3 business days to go through their review process, at which point the links will actually become live. The book is going to be purchasable and readable. It's going to be available as $12.99 on paperback. I'm going to have an ebook for $5.99. I think it's through Kindle, but you can just buy the ebook as well. It will also be available on Kindle Unlimited. If you have Unlimited, you can read it for free. And the links will be, again, like I said, links will be live in a few days. One other thing, I will be doing US pre-orders for signed personalized copies. This will cost just a little bit more because there's like an extra step of shipping, because essentially I have to order the books from Amazon, sign them, personalize them, and then ship them again. So it would be the $12.99 plus somewhere between like $8 and $10, depending on where you're at in the US, to cover that extra shipping step. If you are interested in a personalized signed copy of the book, you can shoot me a DM. I'll be advertising this for my writers' workshops for the next several weeks too, but or if you just want to check it out, totally cool. I spent a lot of time on it. It is it is a completely original work. If you're not familiar with Kind of Blue, it is set in a universe very similar to that of Snoot Game, but is legally distinct from it. And it's set in a version of the late 1950s, so it goes into kind of like some crime mystery elements. It has a backdrop of jazz music. It has a lot of like action and intrigue and stuff like that. It was a ton of fun to write. I really enjoyed it, and it is my first official published book, not including Bonds, unfortunately. You know, Bonds was a fun little side project, but this is actually full published, available in a few days. So there's my ad break. All right, step 4. I'm going to try to get through this with time for some questions. I don't have a ton more slides, but I have just a couple more things. So, step 4. Now you want to prepare your work for publishing. So, depending on which route you decide to take, you are going to need to do some work to prepare your manuscript. Again, if you are working with a publishing house and they're like, hey, we're going to pay for an editor for you. Wow, congratulations. You've saved a bunch of time. They're going to help you a lot. But you're probably going to have to do a lot of this work yourself. This is going to include some elements such as formatting your PDF properly. That was that typesetting thing we talked about before. It's going to include, adding necessary legal jargon to your book, including your copyright, and then commissioning art for your cover. Now, I will say a lot of these self-publishing sites will offer plenty of guides to clarify their needs. I would recommend be careful to follow their guides. Here's an example. For Kindle Direct Publishing, they give you a template based on the size of your book, right? My book was 464 pages long, so they gave me a template for the cover. I had to exactly fit that template, including, the spine, where the barcode is sitting, bleed, all that stuff. This was the one aspect of this I received some help with. Ryan on Riker, super cool guy. He helped me with essentially formatting the art that I had commissioned and getting everything fitting properly, getting the logo and making it look real pretty. He essentially worked with me to do that. So, super cool guy. I still have to pay him, so I owe him some shekels for his hard work. I'll get around to it. But again, do follow their guides. The one thing you don't want to have happen is sit there and spend hours working on your PDF only to try to upload it and have Amazon say, hey, you fucked up, you did something wrong, go back and do it again, right? You're not going to invalidate hours and hours of work, but you might. There's a good chance if something is fucked up, it could be bad, and you might need to really spend a lot of time to fix it. So be careful. Do the best you can on your first try so you reduce the rework you might have to do. So speaking of preparing your PDF, when you create your PDF, you're going to have to ensure that it has, 1, proper page size. What type of book are you printing? Are you printing 6x9 American US trade size? Are you printing 5x8, slightly smaller? Are you printing larger, right? There's a lot of considerations there, but you have to consider your proper page size. A lot of software, including Microsoft Word and others, will let you account for your page size and format it appropriately, but you still got to be careful. 2, your proper font and font size. Hooray! Times New Roman? Fuck it, don't use it. Times New Roman is a bane of every writer's existence. It sucks. Use Comic Sans. Print your work in Comic Sans and everyone will be impressed by your gumption. But you want to make sure that you have the right font and the right font size. There's a ton of research you can do online, there's tons of resources that'll point you in the right direction for this. Here's some suggestions, here's some stuff. I ended up going with something called Century Schoolbook, I think. Like Century is a good font. That's what I use for Bonds.
I think is a good font. I'm kind of basic. I either go Courier or I go Arial.
Sure. The one caveat to that, I think Times New Roman and Arial are a little noticeable. So a lot of times, like if you are publishing something professionally, people will see that and they'll go, yep, he just used the default. So it's a minor thing. I don't think anyone's going to really shit on you for your font, unless you use Comic Sans, but it's still something. Like, just look into it, see what looks the best, see what other authors use. It's probably a good way to go about it. Make sure that you have page numbers on your pages and that they're on the proper sides of the page. I'm going to show you an example in a minute or two here of where that doesn't happen. Spacing and indentation for your page folds. You know how a book is bound in the center? Well, that crease in the center makes it pretty fucking hard to read words that go straight up to the edge of the page, or even kind of close to the edge of the page. So you actually need to set up and format your stuff to have extra indentation there. How about proper title pages, right? For your chapter titles, do you have the proper title pages? Are they spaced properly? Do they also have a page number above them? Because they shouldn't. Most published books don't. There's so many stupid considerations. Do you have all the legal jargon and other necessities in the front of your book? I will say this is going to be different for your digital/ebook versions and your print versions, right? The print version is a lot more minutia based. You have to really make sure that everything's looking nice. For the digital version, a lot of it is automated, but you still have to make some considerations, right? I would say producing the digital version of Kind of Blue is a lot easier. This is a screenshot of the app. It's called Kindle Create. I literally plugged the manuscript into it, and it did almost all the work for me, right? It double-checked it, scanned through, and built my table of contents, which, another fun fact, a table of contents on a digital ebook is required. A table of contents on a paperback book is super amateurish. You don't need a table of contents. Why would you need a table of contents? You need a table of contents for a textbook. You just don't need it in a printed version. So, again, just a thing to think about, But this app that was here, it was really nice because it did a lot of the work for me. I still had to retool a couple things. This is funny enough. This is where I noticed that typo that gave me a conniption I mentioned before. But you will have 2 or possibly 3 different versions. Another fun fact, you will have a separate ISBN number for each type of your book. I have a separate ISBN number for my digital book and for my paperback. If I were to do a hardcover, I would have a 3rd ISBN number. It's like you're saying ATM machine. I should just be saying ISBN because the N stands for number. Now, not to throw shade, I say this with all the love in my heart, there are a couple of snooters who have published their works to some mixed end results. I'm not going to be mean. I'm not going to point out specific examples. I will say you can just jam your work into a document and push it through, but the less professional something appears, the less seriously people will take it. Now, to their credit, the couple of snooters who have printed stuff haven't really done it for monetary gain. They have not been sincerely publishing. They were more doing it as a favor for their readers, saying, hey, we want to do this thing that's nice for you. Totally cool. I appreciate that. But there were a couple of glaring problems. So, again, the reason I bring this up, the less professional it looks, the less seriously people are going to take it if you are trying to dive into the professional realm of publishing. And as always, I will recommend to do your homework. Now, this is the example I was talking about. This guy's not in our Snoot community, but I have a friend who I've been talking with extensively who is a published author. He's published like a dozen books or more. Like, he's got a lot under his belt. He does a lot. And I bought a paper copy of one of his books. Not a bad book, but if you take a look there, the page numbers, even though they are correct, that the even numbers on the left, the odd numbers on the right, they're on the inside of the page. So, like, when you're trying to read, and see how close to the fucking crease it is? Like, you can't see the page number when you're reading this thing. It's just a weird, goofy little nuance that I'm sure was just an innocent mistake he made. He just accidentally put it on the wrong left and right for his pages. But that's the type of thing you got to be careful about, right? Make sure your page numbers are on the right side of the page, or the outside side of the page, or the center. You can also do the center, but again, they can't be on the inside because they're right next to that centerfold crease. Now, personally, what I did, I full send ripped off a book I like. Welcome to a little photo slideshow. So, when I made the paper copy of Kind of Blue and I was preparing the PDF for it, I grabbed my copy of Leviathan Wakes by James S.A. Corey, which is a book I love. In fact, slightly inspired Kind of Blue with the fact that it alternates between 2 POV characters. Kind of Blue alternates between 3 POV characters, but I definitely used that as inspiration. He goes chapter to chapter. I did the same thing. But not only are our books the same size, right? His is just a teeny bit bigger, but it's essentially 6x9 trade. Take a look at the opening page. The opening page is what's called an eye catch, and an eye catch is where you essentially take a blurb of text from your story that you enjoy, or that you think people will enjoy. If they pick up your book and they open to the first page and they read just this one page, they should be enticed to read more. It's an eye catch. Pages 2 and 3, almost the exact same. Page 2 is the other books by the author. Again, the Leviathan Wakes was the first book that James S.A. Corey did, so that was the first one under his name. This is the first book I did. I was harangued by my friend Riker to include Bonds. I chose not to because I didn't want that to become a thing. But this is my first legit book, right?
Maybe I understand this like too similar. I would think the title would be on the right anyways. So this one's fine. The eye-catching page,
Mhm.
I think I understand by adding the quote on top, like similar to his. Maybe adding it in the middle could break it up a bit.
Well, this is excerpted right from the story.
Yeah.
This came right from the story. So, like, when you get to the end of chapter 1, this is exactly what happens. I just copy-pasted it. The only thing I did is I took that little blurb of text and put it in the center to just be like an extra eye catch.
Okay.
So, yeah, I appreciate it.
I was just worried if you get, like, some weird backlash, plagiarism, some shit like that.
No, it can't. Well, that's the thing. There's nothing copyrighted about the format and layout of a book.
Exactly.
There's only one company I know that could somehow copyright format, and that's probably the mouse.
Right. And the thing is, many publishing houses do the same thing. Like, if you pick up any book off your shelf, you're going to see something super similar to this, even if it's not the exact same. Many books do an eye catch, many books do a title page, many books do a copyright page at the front. It can change slightly, sure, but this is almost exclusively par for the course, how this goes. Right? So again, pages 4 and 5, I have my copyright jargon's a lot thinner than theirs because his is published by a publishing house, so they have a lot of extra shit. Mine's super straightforward. My copyright, disclaimer, book is a work of fiction, quick, like, no part of this can be reproduced, ISBN number, first edition, and then credits for my cover illustrator and designer, and my cover layout. And then interior, like, now you start to see some differences. I did not one-to-one copy him for every single aspect. I use a different font. I use different tab indentations. I use different font size for my chapter headers. I do not use the floating large letter. You notice how the letter 150 years before, it's got that large A. It's a common thing for print. I did not choose to do that. But you can just see, again, side to side, we have some similarities, we have some differences, but this was the standard I held myself to. I held a literal book in my hand, and I made sure, does my book look close to this? If it looks pretty close to this, it's going to look professional. Is it exactly the same? No, of course not. It's an original book. Now, with that said, another point of this is commissioning an artist. There are services out there where you can just get generic book cover art. Do be careful, because some of these have begun using AI. If you're comfortable with that, cool. If you're not comfortable with that, make sure that the service you're going through is not AI-generated art. Sometimes you can just license a quick thing. $50, $75. Here's a picture of a wizard. Use it.
Here's
whatever.
Fabio, like every smutbuck uses.
Yeah. Like, there are places out there that will service this.
Photoshop Fabio.
There are places that will service this. I mean, you can honestly do the art yourself, too. If you're artistically inclined, that's great. There are some considerations for art you got to be careful of course. But you can also commission an artist, right? I will warn, or I will say, if you do commission an artist, you have to be clear and upfront about the artwork's purpose. You need to have it in writing that you intend to use the art for a book that is going to be sold, because there is a chance that this will impact their rates. What it can do is it can increase the rate. Sometimes they will demand a commission. It's up to you if you want to accept that or not. If you think that their art is good enough that they deserve to receive 1% of all of your sales for the rest of time, be careful. Again, you go gangbusters, all of a sudden that 1% is millions of dollars. You got to be real careful. A lot of times, artists will do commissions for published works, but they may charge more. I don't recall for certain. I know I paid north of a few $100 for my art. You could make a contract. Again, not legal advice. You could do a contract. It's advisable, but it is not required, so long as you have it in writing somewhere that we agreed that this art is going to be used for a published thing that I'm going to make money with. Is that okay? If they say yep, that's perfectly fine, and they agree to do the work, you're good. You can present that in court. The artist that I worked with is an artist named Octopus. You may have seen him on Twitter or elsewhere. He did this snake lady character, and I saw his artwork, and a buddy of mine commissioned him to do like a comic, and I was like, that's cool. And I just started chatting with the guy, and he was like, yeah, I'd love to do artwork for your book. I was like, holy shit. All right, great. So I think the art turned out great that I got for the cover. It was lovely, but it was a commissioned piece. I did have to pay for it. Now, a note on artificial intelligence. I will say the service that I went through with, again, Amazon Kindle, there was a checkbox that I had to check to advocate whether I used any AI tools during the creation of my work. That includes cover, that includes formatting, that includes, did I have AI write some chunks of my book? It probably wouldn't be an issue if you used AI for things like ideas, but I would recommend that you exercise extreme caution with this. The reason I bring this up is there are a lot of people out there who go to these AI sites and they're like, oh, I'm just using it to get some ideas for writing. I'm not copying it. I'm just getting some ideas. It's like,
would ChatGPT be example?
That would be an example. Be very careful with that. Again, I'm not saying it's atrocious and bad, because is ChatGPT any different than chatting with a friend of yours and saying, hey, I had this idea, and them saying, oh, what if this happened? Not really, but just be careful. Again, the one thing I don't want is for you to be, seeing some story that ChatGPT suggested, so you copy it, and you just change a few words so the teacher doesn't realize you copied the homework, and then you get in a lot of trouble for it. That's not a good thing. So, why does any of this matter, right? Any of the stuff I've just talked about, I've talked about like the professionalism of, making sure everything looks pretty, all this stuff. Why does any of it matter, right? There are a lot of folks out there, myself included, who will be disinterested in your work if it is unprofessional. I know that sounds harsh, but it's the truth. If you produce something that looks shoddy, that is filled with typos, that is not formatted properly, that's ugly and a pain in the ass to read, it hurts your eyes because the font is so fucking small, I'm not going to read it. Traditional publishing houses and paid editors can help with the minutia, of course, if you are going traditional publishing or you're paying an editor. Unless you have those tools, you are going to have to put in the legwork yourself, right? You got to spend the time to do this if you want to retain your readers and you want to keep them interested. We're in the home stretch. This is the last bit, right? Step 5, hitting that publish button. Long story short, to do this is going to take more time than you expect. This is going to involve checking, double checking, triple checking, and quadruple checking your work. Again, we've kind of talked about this. I did mention before with patience, remember the Johnny Depp system, being impatient will 100% lead to errors. Fun little personal anecdote for this. When I produced Bonds, the first run of Bonds that I did was hardcover. I did a very limited run. I made 40 copies of it. About half of them were given to my friends, family, and other people like that. The other half were given to people who donated money or whatever.
Yeah.
I was impatient. And what happened is I got the books. They were okay, but the cover art was much darker than I expected. It did not look very nice. It did not look very vibrant.
Is CMYK?
No, it wasn't an issue with that. It was just for some reason the hardcover just printed darker. Like, it didn't look that dark in the previews.
Okay.
But I skipped the buying a copy for myself as a proof copy to avoid that. I was impatient, and I paid for it, right? I have a lesser first product because of it. I fixed a lot of the issues. And inside the book, there were a couple of errors. Like, there was a couple of areas where, like, there was a weird paragraph break. It was just kind of awkward. Not the end of the world, but again, less professional than I wanted it to be. So I could fix them. I was able to go back and fix them. But now, those 40 first edition books that are floating around in the world are permanently not as good as they could have been.
They're rare
Be patient.
They're rare copies now.
Yeah, they might be collector's items at some point.
Yeah.
So, I would advocate that you ensure everything is as it should be. First off, verify your manuscripts, make sure your covers are the right sizes, test your uploads to make sure everything looks good. Many of these services will offer preview tools. Do make sure to make use of them. You also might be able to purchase a proof copy of your book. Do this. That's what I just talked about. The whole I didn't purchase a proof copy of my first run of bonds and I regretted it. Buy a proof copy. It'll cost you $10, right? That proof copy of Kind of Blue that I got cost me $10, and I caught a couple of very small formatting errors on the cover I was able to fix. So, hey, it wouldn't have been the end of the world. It's just a couple of slight things I thought looked a little bad and could look a little better. I checked the inside of the book. Everything looks good. I hope it's good. It's in the barrel. It's ready to be printed, but I did not skip this step, and I had to wait an extra week for it. Next, set your pricing. This is fun, right? Believe it or not, you can potentially make a little money if you do self-publishing. Now, don't expect to quit your day job, at least not anytime soon, right? The margins for these are razor thin, and unfortunately, it's even more so with self-publishing. I would recommend that you do some homework as to how you should price your work. There are resources online that make recommendations, like if you're self-publishing, you're a first-time author, you can theoretically charge this for a book of this size, usually by word count. But the more you try to charge for your book, the less people are possibly going to buy it, right? Are you more interested in making an extra dollar per book, or are you more interested in getting your book into more people's hands? That's the balancing act. The $12.99 that I settled on for Kind of Blue could have been $14.99. I could have charged $20. I could have charged $30, but a ton of people wouldn't buy it for that price. What the fuck? Some new first-time author? Like, why am I going to buy this fic with anthropomorphic dinosaurs for $30? Like, bonds cost more because bonds cost more to produce. As I said before, when you do self-printing, it costs a bunch more to actually print. But with this, they're covering a lot of those costs because, again, it's Amazon, right? They're basically doing that for you. And at the end of the day, charging $12.99 for a physical copy, I'm going to make like $1 per book. That's after everything. That's after their cut. That's after the fees, after the printing, everything. I'm going to make like $1. Is that okay? No. Could I make more? Well, but here's the thing. I'm not planning. I have a day job, right? This is a first effort. If I sell a bunch of copies of this book, let's say this takes off. Let's say, holy shit, I suddenly become a New York Times bestseller somehow. That'd be awesome. When I make my next book, I can charge more for it. But as a first effort, this is perfectly fine. You just have to set your price, and you have to kind of manage your expectations. Again, it might feel better to make...
It might buy you dinner.
It might... Well, here's the other thing. Digital copies and Kindle Unlimited make you more money. For this specific setup, the buddy I talked to, he said paper copies of his book account for about 5 or 10% of the money he makes total. A lot of it comes from Kindle Unlimited and from digital copies, because they just have a higher margin, right? It's not a physical product. So, next, social media it up. Self-promotion is likely going to be the only form of promotion that you're going to get for a long while. Personally, I despise social media, but I did still make accounts for my pen name on a lot of platforms. You may also consider picking up a web domain or two. This is not required, but an early investment could save a future headache. I think if you buy a domain that has nobody looking at it, it costs like $40 for 3 years. That was about the price I paid for the 2 domains I picked up. If it's...
What website did you use?
I bought thatoldyorktone.com and jtcamp.com. It's not anything. If you go to it right now, it's dead. I just bought the rights for it like a week ago. So I'm going to make a website, but that's not going to happen for like the next month or so.
Okay.
I appreciate you trying to look at it, but yeah, it's. I bought the domain because if I released this and suddenly someone was like, "Oh, I'm going to go snag JT Camp," and then suddenly when I try to buy it, I have to pay $300 instead of $20, I'd be pretty pissed off. You know.
No.
So just a thing to think about. It's not a requirement, but again, an early investment could save you from a future headache. And then lastly, hit the button, right? You got everything done. You put your work online, publish that book. Holy shit, you published a book. Hot damn. Now you can sit back, relax, and enjoy the millions of dollars that roll into your pockets without any effort. So that was a fucking lie. Now comes the persistence part, right? You can do lots of stuff to promote your work. You can shill to your friends and family. You can shill to your online communities. You can discover other communities and participate within them. You can find in-person events. You can find local bookstores, street festivals, college gatherings, etc. The world is your oyster. Now it's time to promote your product and try to get it in people's hands, right? I have a personal dislike of shilling. I do it in something like this. I just did an hour-and-a-half presentation. I'm going to show you a fucking ad for my book, but I just feel weird, like, bringing it up in every single conversation, like, awkwardly stuffing it into, like, hey, you just buy my book. But you got to get exposure somehow, right? Bringing it up, social media posts, all that stuff. I have a plan to participate in my town's local street festival and actually reserve a booth to set up physical copies of the book. I'm going to sell it in person, sign it, personalize it, and I'm going to have a banner that has a QR code on it where if they scan it, it goes straight to my website so they can access the Kindle and Kindle Unlimited versions. I can literally have a banner that says, hey, you want to read this? Read it for free if you have Kindle Unlimited. Boom. Perfect, right? If they come up and they say, is it on Google Play? Well, no, unfortunately. Going through Kindle does mean I can't put it on Google Play, but even still, free book is free book. Easy way to try to, drum up interest. What else can you do? All right, what else is there to do, right? Of course, your life doesn't have to grind to a halt as you promote your work. During this time, you can be working on other writing, perhaps a sequel to what you wrote. You can do that in the interim. The other thing to keep in mind is that nothing happens without effort and persistence, right? You have to put in the effort, even after you've published your book, to ensure that it's getting in people's hands and it's hopefully getting people reading it and enjoying it and clamoring and saying, where's the fucking sequel, right? I read this, I bought it, I read it in 2 days, now I want a sequel, make it right now. Where is it? It should be in my hands right now. Sorry, it's going to take years, so I don't know. To wrap it all up, holy shit, this actually took me an hour and a half, I'm sorry. I was hoping to have a question time, but maybe not. If you are a writer wanting to become an author, put in the effort, and you can achieve your dreams. Hooray! Not everyone can be a successful author, but everyone, or anyone, with determination and passion can become published. It is possible. It's not going to be easy. You're going to have a lot of hurdles. You're going to have a lot of pain in the ass stuff, but you can publish your work. I did it. I'm some fucking random guy. Yeah, I've got some experience writing, but I published this book, right? It ain't impossible. Remember the DEP: discipline, excellence, patience, persistence, and that award-winning smile. Last minute promo. Check out my weekly writers workshop on the Snoot Club Discord if you are interested in learning how to become a better writer. Again, I do class times. We go over people's fanfics. I am not perfect, but I do know some shit. I'm happy to impart wisdom where I can. Also, buy my book. Hooray! There's the shill again. All right. And for everyone's knowledge, in my writers workshops, as a formality at the end, we always have Fang's head appear, and she does spin.
Very nice.
So I threw that in here too. All right, there you go. That's the end of the presentation. I'm sorry, I bounced right into 10:30. Is our next guest ready?
Deadman?
Might want to give me a few minutes.
Alright, sounds like you got a few minutes.
Okay, we have a few minutes for questions. I don't have any questions about anything.
When you're shopping, what are some extra things that you're looking for when you're shopping around for a publishing house? For your self-publishing?
For self-publishing?
Yeah, what are some extra wish list items that you would say are a good idea to have?
Well, I mean, it really depends on how much work you want them to do versus how much of a commission cut that they take. So one of the things I mentioned before with self-printing, many of those companies will try to push you towards self-publishing. But what kind of reach do they have, right? How often do you go to lulu.com and look up new books? Probably not that often. Do you go to amazon.com very often? Much larger website, right? You might disagree with Amazon on a fundamental level. Maybe you want to avoid them because of that. But if we're talking reach, the base you can find is the best you can get, right? But it's still worthwhile to explore margins, kind of take a look at how much of a cut do they take? Is it worth it to you, right? Would you be willing to go with Lulu as a publisher if you make $2 per book instead of $1 per book? that's kind of what you have to determine. With me, I went with Amazon. They're huge. They print on demand. People anywhere, almost anywhere in the world, many places, many countries will be able to buy this book. They go on there, they spend $13 or the equivalent within their, moon rune currency, whatever it is they're using, and they can buy a copy of the book. That's cool. So
It looks like Riker has something in the chat.
Stella is pretty good. I don't know if she's the best. She's your best. I don't know. For me, Fang has a very special place in my heart. Maybe even with red hair.
Understandable.
True.
Despite the hassle you have to go through to dye red hair gray.
Son of a bitch.
Yeah, I listened to that yesterday.
Apple.
Was there a question or someone chiming up?
Oh no, just I'm just preparing any things, but that was a very interesting presentation, Starman.
Thanks.
Learned a lot about the writing world. I heard the writing world is so hard, but I never knew it was that kind of hard.
I think it's
yeah.
good information for even those who might have stumbled in, who aren't part of the Snoot community, who wouldn't know what a Snoot club is, who don't even know what I'm talking about when I say Snoot.
True.
The bastardization of the word snout. For people who are interested in anthropomorphic dinosaurs. It's a more versatile concept than you think, I assure you.
Yeah. Breaking out in any field is going to come with caveats, right? Like, imagine other fields. Let's say you're a musician. What does it take to become a known musician? What does it take to have your music played on the radio or, streamed online or get billions of hits on YouTube? What does it take? Well, a lot of marketing. You have to do a lot of work. Usually you need an agent. You have to get noticed and picked up. It's the same in many of these creative and career pursuits. At some point, this was years ago, but at some point I had caught a wild hair about trying to get into stand-up comedy. Because I enjoy telling jokes, right? I enjoy being fun and all that stuff. Getting into stand-up comedy is just as much of a nightmare as any other breakout job is, with the added difficulty of you have to get noticed. Like, these people who work comedy club circuits travel around, they go to a comedy club, they make maybe $50, $75 for being on stage for an hour. That's it. And then they have to travel to another show. And they just have to hope that some agent, some talent seeker, is chilling in the crowd that night who notices them and says, you know what, I see potential there. I'm going to sign a contract with that guy, and all of a sudden he's got a special on Comedy Central.
Fuck that.
It doesn't happen for... Right, it doesn't happen for almost anybody. But the thing is, that's the dream, right? That's trying to achieve that. I mean, what's the tried and true, like becoming an actor? Good luck. Right. So, you can publish a book, right? I published a book. I'm not the best author in the planet. I'm not even like a great author. I'm happy with my work, and if people enjoy it, I'm going to be super happy. But I have no aspirations of this becoming a huge thing. If it does, I'll be pleasantly pleased, but I'm just going to keep working on it. I'm printing this as a first go. I'm going to keep working on it, and maybe by book 2 or book 3 or something, maybe I'll be noticed a little more. Who knows? Takes time.
Maybe Scholastic will pick you up.
Woo! I have too many curse words. There's too many F-bombs in my story for that. So.
Well, either way, that was great. Learned a lot from that presentation, and
Appreciate you, man.
I've heard a lot about Bonds, so there's a lot of fanfic that I need to read.
Dead man, I have but one command. Read Bonds.
What? I will.
Bonds is okay. It's outdone at this point. I'm much more... I mean, this came later, but I'm much more pleased with this. Bonds is still... I'm glad people enjoy it, but that is definitely a first endeavor.
Mm-hmm. That's understandable. Well, I think I got everything set up for my presentation now.
Cool. Well, I appreciate everyone enjoying, and I'll pass it over.
Hey, yeah, it was awesome. Okay, so just stream it.